in a 2011 shooting of a black man after a very high-speed chase. Here now with reaction, she knows the case well. Nationally syndicated radio talk show host Dana Loesch is with us. Dana, I know you know this inside and out. I want to go over the dash cam video. Before I do, what about the clergy to the judge? The blood will be on your hands if Jason Stockley is acquitted of murder. Are they the judge, jury, and executioners in this case?
Apparently, they're threatening people here if the verdict didn't go the way that they wanted it to go. Look, the evidence is clear. And first off, the prosecution, Sean, as you well know, they had the responsibility of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Jason Stockley did not act in self-defense. And that's what he had claimed from the beginning, that he had acted in self-defense. Now, that was the prosecution's responsibility to prove that. They failed to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. That is not this judge's fault. That is the prosecution's fault for not proving that. Furthermore, all of these individuals out here that are mad about this system, I bet none of them showed up, Sean, to vote for this judge when he was up for re-election, because apparently, judges can be voted on, and the voter turnout in St. Louis is abysmal. So I'm just curious as to how many people participated in changing of that system. But blood will be on the judge's hands and pressuring the judge in this particular case?
Yeah, it's a Either you give us the verdict we want. All right, we're running the dash cam video, and I watched it. It's a long video. It starts out. This is a high-speed chase. Everybody in harm's way as this guy's racing down the street, crashes into police officers. Take us at the point of the shooting, which we're not going to air because we don't really want the audience to see that part. And then there was not only the police dash cam, but there was another video that the judge had for evidence in this case, and that was the police officer going from this guy's car and putting the gun inside the back of the car. Now they're claiming, okay, but there's no DNA prints on it, therefore it couldn't possibly have been this guy's gun. Let's go from there. Yeah. Well, they can't, unfortunately, they weren't able to prove that accusation that they brought up. Prosecution wasn't. And in this video, when Jason Stockley, because they get out, and obviously shots are fired, one of the things that they had testified was that he was reaching for something in the car. That immediately made officers fear for their lives. Then there was the question of why Stockley was going back to the police car. He was rummaging around in the back seat. He had later said in his testimony that he was going for a first aid kit. But then, Sean, there was a portion of the video where he did bring his own personal firearm, and he did put that in the back seat of the police cruiser as well. And of course, that apparently that's against the police department policy. Understandable. That the fact that he apparently made clear the revolver in question, and it was from what I understand, from what I remember, that was reported, it was a large caliber revolver. But he was putting a rifle in the back of the car, correct?
In the back of the police cruiser, he had taken. And the cruiser?
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, he was putting a rifle in the back of the cruiser, and that's one of the things that former police chief Sam Dodson, that he ended up suspending. One of the reasons why he ended up suspending Stockley was because he had his own personal firearm there with him, along with the department issued sidearm that he had as well. He had his own personal firearm there with him that did not fire. I want to point that out because I know when you were going to Mike Tobin earlier, Sean, he was talking to some of the individuals that were out there protesting, demonstrating peacefully. They had said that he had used his AK-47, the firearm that he had, the pistol that he had not been fired. So I want to make that clear because that's something I think that some of the protesters are believing that they're being told, but that's not actually accurate. It was never fired.
That was not the firearm. Right.
That was not fired. Right. Right. That was not fired. And so ultimately, the bottom line, Sean, is this. If using a vehicle to mow down police officers, that is assault with a deadly weapon. That's what happened in the beginning when they approached Anthony Lamar, when they approached Lamar Smith, and he was in the parking lot of the Church's Chicken. They saw some sort of deal go down that they assumed was a drug deal. They engaged, and he did not follow orders. In fact, he backed up in the video. He backed up his vehicle and then gunned it, rammed forward, actually hitting one of the police officers' hands. When you use your vehicle and you're charging at officers, that's assault with a deadly weapon. You do not have the freedom to mow down officers with your vehicle. That is assault. You could lose your life. You could lose your life if you're engaging in a drug deal and you're not following orders and you look like you're reaching for your firearm. You may lose your life. And so the prosecution, Sean, they did not prove their case. And so Stockley won because he had argued, his side had argued that he was defending his life. And quite frankly, when you look at this video, Sean, You cannot dispute it. You cannot dispute the video. This is, Sean, I have to tell you, as a St. Louis native, this is the same stuff that we heard with the Mike Brown case, when everyone said hands up, don't shoot. But yet the jurors, the individuals, the witnesses that were selected from Ferguson, from that community, Mike Brown's community, those witnesses said that never actually happened. That whole lie was able to go around the world. And I'm so tired of this happening. You have video evidence. Don't run down cops and you won't get shot. Police lives matter too, period.
All right, Dana, stay right there. Very good point. And people just seem to dismiss all of it. Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, is with us tonight as we also put up images of what's going on now at the moment on the ground. That's from earlier today, but we'll go to a live shot and take a look at what's happening. Geraldo, what's your take on it?
Well, I think that, first of all, Sean, let's be real here. I've been covering urban police work for half a century, and in my early days as a street reporter in New York City, there is no doubt but that the whole notion of throw down guns was a relatively common phenomenon in urban police departments throughout the country. Now, full stop. That's decades ago. But throw down guns are not unheard of in police work. Let's be fair.
But everything's on video, Geraldo. This whole thing's on video.
My thoughts are balance it out here.
Yeah, I know.
It is also fair that when you have a low-down, dirty heroin dealer, multi-convictions, in trouble with cops, for years, a real thug, as the judge suggests, that person, in the judge's experience, is usually someone with a gun. So I think that the issue here is an issue of reasonable doubt. As the judge struggled with this verdict for the last month, the judge finally came to the conclusion that the prosecution, for all their sincerity, did not manage to meet the burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. Did the cop go into his bag, the duffel, to get a gun out to plant on the perpetrator after he had already been killed? The judge felt that the prosecution did not make that argument beyond a reasonable doubt. When I see these demonstrators, though, they seem genuinely concerned, Sean, the vast majority of them. This isn't, a militant, anarchistic, Antifa kind of crowd, it seems to me. These are people who really are agonizing
for the
over
most part peaceful, by the way.
Reality that black people, that black men really are at risk in encounters with cops.
But, what about the embracing? We see a lot of Black Lives Matter signs and T-shirts and people holding them, Geraldo. And maybe I'll throw this first to Dana. And, whenever I hear, if you listen to the chants, what do we want, dead cops? When do we want them now? It's loud. What do we want? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. It's loud. It seems to have gone mainstream, and nobody seems to care that that group was involved in saying those things about cops in particular.
No, you're right,
Dana.
Sean. I remember that all too well. And Sean, I want to point back everybody to St. Louis when after Ferguson, when there were the organizations, the organizers that began bussing in protesters. Because remember, the number of arrests in Ferguson, over 70% of those were people who actually didn't even live in Ferguson. You had, and I think what began as a genuine conversation between members of the community, of the black community, and law enforcement, it was hijacked, Sean. It was hijacked by, everybody remembers Acorn. Well, Acorn dissolved and became a group called MORE, a community organizing group that's in St. Louis. They were the ones who actually paid protesters in Ferguson. Those individuals hijacked those protests. They got violent. They got all the camera time. And for anyone who would doubt that, Sean, we know for a fact that they were paid because when the checks weren't cut, they protested, and they had the whole hashtag cut the check on Twitter. And they had a protest outside the offices.
The most amazing thing that came out of that case with Darren Wilson, it was people in the community. If I'm not mistaken, if not all, the vast majority that were black citizens in Ferguson that testified on behalf of Darren Wilson and confirmed and corroborated his story.
That's
we'll come
right.
back. Dana, stay there. We'll check in
right,
with
Sean.
more with Geraldo. Our reporters on the ground. There are protests in the city of St. Louis tonight in reaction to a former police officer being acquitted. First-degree murder, 2011 shooting of a black man, as Hannity continues.